episode 265 of View from 202. It is finally now the preseason review episode for 2024. The moment we've all been waiting for. Everything so far has been our off season. This is the preseason. It's only 1 week left. The New York Red Bulls, believe it or not, are kicking off on Sunday away at Nashville. So it's time for us to sit down and actually look at the squad and think about the season. We've been putting it off.
This is all the season starting because the groundhog didn't see the shadow?
That's true, yeah. If the groundhog saw a shadow, we get pushed back to a regular schedule.
Right.
Is this the earliest start ever?
For regular season? Because I feel like
It
this
was
is
last
like,
week of February last year, right?
It was
Maybe?
February 26th I have in my head last year.
But this is this is CCL season, or supposed to be.
Right.
You
Remember
know?
CCL?
I can't remember whether it was before COVID or not when they started stretching it up to like early March and February, but seems like it's the brave new world.
What have happened to
Stay
CCL? The strong, silent type
You
of
don't
competition.
hear about the CONCACAF Champions League much anymore.
I wish they did more with CCL. It was one of my
One of
favorite
my
characters.
favorite characters. I loved that character.
Actually, though, did they cancel it? I feel
No,
like
it's still around. But it's literally like I never hear about it happening until I see, a random person on Twitter going like, "Oh my God, this fucking crazy, Tigres goal just now." It's like that's still happening. Like, it fooled me.
Yeah, because even now,
It's just a straight knockout tournament.
okay.
There's no group
right.
stage.
But it used to be that around this time of year, even if your team wasn't in it, your MLS team wasn't in it, it would be easy to track down or just be aware of which MLS teams were in it and progressing. And now I have no idea.
Yeah, part of that is the CCL being, kind of downplayed in the media scene that MLS kind of lords over, and then also MLS, that same media scene, propping up Leagues Cup, which has just invited literally like every fucking team on the planet. But I think also CCL has added a few extra slots that make it, kind of less, that kind of cheapen it a little bit.
I really wish
Cheapen the thought of having a CCL berth.
I really wish I've had to think about CCL recently.
I knew something
yeah.
changed. They renamed it to CONCACAF Champions Cup. Not to be
There's a
confused
game on right now
with who's playing?
St. Louis and Houston Dynamo.
St. Louis and Houston. 2 MLS teams are playing. What round is it?
Round 1.
I love how
What does that mean? Round 1?
I love that there's now like 8 different tournaments where MLS teams play each other.
Round 1 of what? It could be 16. It could be 2. Also, Champions Cup, not to be confused with Leagues Cup, not to be confused with Campeones Cup, not to be confused with
Superliga.
With what's the CONCACAF like Nations League Cup? Like, isn't like the
Right.
winner of the Nations League plays like the Gold Cup winner, but also
Right.
if there's 2 Gold Cups that have different winners, they
They
also
then
play
have
like a Super Cup.
They have the CONCACAF Cup.
Okay, is that actually what it's called?
That was literally what they had for that game at the Rose Bowl between U.S. and Mexico.
It's all cup.
Under Klinsmann.
They can't all be cups.
Speaking of which, R.I.P. Jurgen Klinsmann, friend of the pod.
Oh, thank
and
God.
friend of Peaches Nation.
Korea is saved. Apparently, there have been 5 games of this tournament played, and one of them has included an MLS team already, and that's Vancouver versus Tigres.
What happened?
They drew 1-1.
Wow.
Vancouver, of course Vancouver's in the CCL. They're one of the best MLS teams, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It matters to be in CCL, right?
This does make me realize we have one thing that we could potentially add to our list of things to cover today, which is the whole Open Cup CCL snafu situation, which I guess I've mentioned it. I guess we can knock it out quickly. What's the latest MLS only wants to send MLS next pro teams to the U.S. Open Cup. And the USSF was like, no, you can't do that.
Well, now the word is friend of the pod, Michael Batista, got a quote from somebody saying that they might just be canceling the Open Cup now because they're there's so much of an impasse between getting MLS to participate. But then the other end of it too, as far as like, official things that have happened, is that I guess the USSF committee that runs the Open Cup, the chairman of it just stepped down a couple days ago.
There was also the issue that CONCACAF stepped in and said that the Open Cup can't receive a Champions Cup, not League, Champions Cup berth if MLS doesn't participate.
Yeah.
Which I was surprised. My first thought when I heard that news was that actually maybe would have benefited the U.S. Open Cup, because then I thought maybe that's a bargaining chip for them to be like, right, MLS Next Pro doesn't count. In order for it to be competition, you guys have to send it. But I guess most people are interpreting it the other way, that it was siding with MLS. Because I guess it's more of a loss for the federation if the Open Cup doesn't get the berth. I don't know, because then also that's really mostly MLS. MLS always gets that berth. It's an extra berth for MLS in the Continental Tournament. So I don't know. Either way, it seems like maybe they're running out of time to even sort this out or do that sort of brinksmanship. But another thing that, just doesn't feel like it has great energy going into this season, building off of our theme from last week, it does seem like there's just something in the water here, league-wide, not just with RBNY, maybe particularly with RBNY, but league-wide, it seems like the energy is off.
Well, there was I don't know if you were just going to mention 2 pages. I mean, there was a tweet that got a little bit of traction, I guess, earlier today. We're recording on Tuesday, depending on when this goes out. But that Christian Dyer, who a lot of fans may be familiar with, he hasn't been covering the team as much the last few years, but still somebody with a long background in covering MLS and knowing the league. And he came out and said today that, this feels like least energy, least hype, least kind of just presence. It feels like that MLS season is, just around the corner. I mean, how much you want to put that on the Apple deal, how much you want to put that on the league just being kind of in a malaise, especially with the fog of everything starting to revolve around Messi. But, whatever, kind of diagnosis you want to give, it definitely is a little bit of, at least maybe for our generation, our crowd, whatever kind of sort of scene you want to put us in, maybe it's specific to that only, but still, feels like, like we're not alone in feeling like the league was a lot more compelling in past years.
Well, I would even say that potentially it's not just us, because Dwayne Rollins, that Toronto guy, who's not exactly, I mean, we don't know him, we've never really fought with him, but I wouldn't consider him really contemporary of ours. Like, it was also like, what's the deal with this messy stuff? I'm tired of it. Like, it feels like they doth protest too much. So, I don't know.
Kind of along the lines of the messy stuff, I was going to make a broader cultural diagnosis, I guess, where kind of cynically I was like, oh, the real season, the transfer window is over, which is why people aren't paying attention. But, to that point, too, if you look at this transfer window for MLS, it wasn't really that exciting. Yeah,
there was that graphic. We were kind of talking about a graphic that somebody put up the other day that was like, the biggest transfers, or the biggest stars, all the stars
it's
are
Hugo
here,
Lloris
coming to MLS this summer, or this season. And we've of course been a little bit like underwhelmed by Forsberg, and kind of talking about how it's really not as big of a deal as people are playing it up to be. But then when you see this graphic, Forsberg legitimately is one of the top 2 or 3, highest profile guys to come to the league this season. And that's like, we're not saying that, that really isn't saying much, because it's kind of a weak bench. There's Luis Suarez coming in. He's like 40 now, and apparently on a croc knee, won't be able to play like half the games. Like, they're openly saying that. And then there's Forsberg
ruining Inter's Miami's roster.
Yeah, well, then there's Forsberg, there's Lloris, like Peaches just said, and then once you get past that, it's a lot of like Dante Van Zers. It's a lot of just like the kind of like Chicago signed some Belgian league striker. I guess his name's like Kuipers for 10 million. Dallas signed a guy from Benfica. I thought this was a pretty sexy signing, to be honest. And I, kind of mentioned that it's like, it's the sort of signing that, there's no reason Red Bull shouldn't be making, but they signed this guy, a Croatian international from Benfica, striker, for about 10 mil, which like, he's like 26, 27. He's had some goals for Benfica. He's not just a scrub, which like pretty good signing, but yeah, beyond that, doesn't seem like there was a whole lot of real like big incoming transfers to the league this year.
Under inflation, like eight-figure signings apparently just don't move the needle much anymore.
Biden's America.
Might push back a little bit in some respect. We say like Hugo Lloris is a player that like 5 years ago, like not the biggest thing in the world, but I've been like, oh, that's sort of neat. I mean, imagining him at his stage of his career, like there were signings like that in the league that used to like turn your head or be more noteworthy.
Cesar.
Yeah, or like I would also even say Benteke maybe is the last
Frank
player
Ross.
that came.
I mean,
over where you're like, oh, this isn't the biggest deal in the world, but it's pretty neat.
Yeah,
or like
Drogba.
Drogba is like on the higher end of that, but who was the other defender that that went to Montreal, the Italian guy?
Nesta.
Yeah. But that was even further back. But I think part of me wonders if the league just never really recovered from like when the Dos Santos brothers came over and Chicharito came over, and then like PT Martinez came over, and like that PT was supposed to be like the next wave of like the Almiron thing,
like, top tier South American prospects.
The Dos Santos brothers were kind of a version of that, and then Chicharito was like the latest version of like a big established guy, and like none of them mattered at all. Like they all kind of just disappeared. Yeah. Like the teams were bad, but also like they weren't particularly noteworthy. And I think ever since then, like even the concept of a signing has been really warped. We talked about this a lot last week, so I won't belabor the point. But I think that also
what even does it
it
mean to be a big signing in MLS anymore?
Right.
And it's just like, and teams are still caught in that. Teams and media are, especially league in-house media are still caught up in this premise of like, it's all about, just getting one or two star players or just, your key. I mean, obviously Messi is, just an entire other, stratosphere of this sort of discourse, but this idea that, it's all about just getting one player, both to like activate your fan base and sell tickets or whatever, but also to even a lot of people to win games. And it's just kind of like, that seems, especially as we're maturing as a league and a soccer country, that seems to fly in the face of what actually, compels people about soccer. And to, the point of what Brit was just saying, like, you can bring in Chicharito or just, all of these guys who are high up in the magazine prospect rankings or whatever. But if the team still sucks, if they're just going into a crappy team that's not, actually functioning very well, nobody's really going to care. And, I'm kind of becoming a broken record warning people about this with Forsberg too, but, we'll have time to get into that later in the episode.
Yeah, I think this leads us well into the first signing we have to discuss, the latest signing by the Red Bulls, Dennis Yengar, a young player from Norwegia. That was honestly a mistake.
That should be what they call it now. Like Czech Republic calls itself Czechia now or whatever. Norwegia.
That feels like a very
like Victorian age.
The kind of joke I do not try to make because it was an intentional joke. It's actually just a slip of the tongue. Norwegian player. He's one of our U22 initiative players. He's a right winger, looks like a quick player, coming from the Norwegian club Odd BK.
Odds BK. Formerly known as Odd Grenland, but now they're just Odds. They dropped the Grenland.
Odds? I swear I was just looking at this.
It's like Odds BK.
Odds BK. Wow. Okay. You're right. I was enjoying some highlights on YouTube produced by Odd Fan TV. Real. Look it up. But I already made this joke on Twitter. I'll spare everyone. I'll say it. I think that if you're a MLS fan, this is a signing that should feel like a nice warm blanket to you. This is like a vintage MLS signing. I mean, like the age of the player is a little bit unusual. I will say that. Like, let's say, if it were like 2013, 2014 MLS, like this guy would actually be like 28, maybe, and like maybe a little bit less money. But if inflation adjusted, actually maybe the same. But what I mean by that is that, this is a player coming from a, similar to maybe, less impressive league in Scandinavia, a well-trodden recruiting ground for MLS teams. Sort of a doesn't cost nothing, but doesn't cost a lot. Probably has some real upside to his game. But if he were a dominant player, and really like a top level talent, he would be in a squad in, one of the big 5 leagues in Europe already by now.
Or even just Netherlands or something.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Looks like a tidy signing in my view.
So I have a couple different framings on this signing, or just, senses of this signing. One is kind of similar to what you just said, Brit, as far as they've really, you touched on this too, where, the thing that got the most attention, mainly because it was just kind of a funny Norwegian word, as most Norwegian words tend to be, that his top speed, or he had the word for like having the top speed in the Norwegian league is the top fart. So he is your elite top farter in Norwegian football.
Reminds me of the MILF Hunter days. Remember that?
Yeah. So we're getting some of that energy back. But also along what Britt was saying, that nice little signing. And again, it's not like, I don't, and the club itself is not really, propping this up as like, he's some, born superstar who's going to lead everyone to greatness. He's being, put up as, kind of a complimentary signing, and that on that term, it's fine. But also kind of like what Britt was saying, if he were actually if there was more to his game beyond his top fart, beyond him being kind of a physical weapon, of the likes of which, Red Bull has often tried to sign over the years of various dimensions, whether it's height or speed or what have you. Red Bull likes to sign physical outliers, and this is kind of an example of that. But if there was much to the rest of his game, we would not be signing him, for, about $1.5 million. He would not be coming to the New York Red Bulls. He would be going somewhere a little bit more serious. It's kind of like that end of it. It's not, it's kind of an old school MLS signing, like Britt said, and it does not line up with a lot of what we were talking about last episode, with the idea that this was going to be some big splashy new offseason where you're going to see stuff that you haven't seen before. This isn't a very big signing for Red Bulls. It's not a very big signing for MLS. Whatever. Maybe, and like Britt said, maybe there's some upside. He's got, he's still young. Maybe there can be some more added to his game, and, he flourishes into being a good player. We won't know for a while, but just in the context of what we know now, there's, everything I just laid out about how, can't be really expecting too much from this signing. And then the other end of it that's interesting to me is that as far as the squad is constructed, he is more or less, as a wide player, I guess he's kind of a right winger. There's some talk that he might even be able to play some fullback. But all intents and purposes, he's the new kind of wide attacking player replacing Omir Fernandez, or kind of auxiliary attacking midfielder replacing Omir Fernandez. And, maybe this, goes into another rabbit hole of what we're going to talk about for the rest of the episode. But I think if you're advertising this season as some new, stronger version of the Red Bulls, that's going to be a completely new path from what they've been doing the last few years, and then that we're finally going to be a team that's ready to win and ready to compete, I don't know why you would replace a player like Omir Fernandez, who's going into his prime, who knows the system, knows the team, has chemistry with the team, is obviously a local, who knows the culture of the city, and is just, generally a known entity, and has been part of, a team that was, doing fairly well at the end of last year. I don't know why you would be so quick to replace that player with a major question mark kind of flyer prospect like you have with Yengar. It just screams, or, it doesn't scream, but I mean, I guess the better way of putting it is that, if you're actually trying to win games and build a squad and keep a squad together and build on that foundation and make it more competitive, you keep Omir Fernandez, who is maybe a less flashy or a less upside having player, but like I said, a known entity. If you're just kind of treating your squad as a place to just, kind of try out random prospects and try out random sort of potential tactical weapons, like a guy with, freakish speed, then I guess it makes sense to sign some, let's be honest, rando from the Norwegian league. That's kind of the long and short of my sort of puzzlement with this signing, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my only thing about, maybe Omir wanted to leave.
Let me just also just add another addendum onto what I was just saying, because I meant to say that too, that maybe Omir Fernandez just flat out wanted to leave and had made up his mind. That doesn't speak very well of the club either.
Right. Sure.
But then also there's that, but then also what I let off with, that Yengar is sort of a potentially like a hybrid fullback / winger. In that case, he's also a complete redundancy in the squad with Cameron Harper.
Cameron Harper, yeah. That's what I was going to say.
Why that is an area, or why that's a type of player we needed to go out and get, I'm not quite sure. So that's another issue with it too. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's like also with that budget, you might be ending up. I mean, it's a lot of money, but you might end up paying a little bit of a premium, but I feel like a lot of our really good signings have been from the league, or players who are, have league experience. I'm sure.
MLS, you mean?
Yeah, I'm sure we could look for players. I feel like it's part of the transfer, the philosophy here at this club almost, to just look for those kind of scandals.
You mentioned it earlier, but Inter Miami is literally being compelled into a fire sale due to all their conspicuous consumption. Mm-hmm. And one of the names on the list that is potentially up for grabs is Robert Taylor. That's another wide player that we could have snagged.
Right.
Might ring a bell, because this is exactly how we got Lewis Morgan last time.
Exactly,
Miami was
in a crunch.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think, even on his own terms, I think 1.5 to 2 mil sounds a little overpriced for a guy from a random club in the Norwegian league, putting that aside. But also, kind of like what Peach is saying about signing guys with experience in the league. That's a major concern I have with what was going on with the team apparently not having a sporting director in place, and that sporting director was a real job where you needed somebody with MLS experience. Lo and behold, we straight up just haven't acquired anybody who's already in MLS this season. And I think, I'm genuinely worried that Schneider doesn't really, whether it's the networking or the, just kind of paperwork know-how, how to get deals done in MLS. I mean, there was a lot of discussion about Kevin Thelwell coming in and, whether he was going to be able to know the, kind of the scene in MLS and the rules in MLS. And the idea was that Hamlet was his kind of guide on that, and that worked kind of well. We got players like Morgan, we got some other players from already within the league, Gutman, some other guys. Whereas now with Schneider, we've literally, going back now 2 years that Schneider's been here, there hasn't been a single internal MLS senior signing. Corey Burke, who maybe free that agent. Again, free agent, and perhaps also a Hamlet kind of decision.
And this is a Hamlet who, I think we've heard through the grapevines, people don't even treat very professionally, or
was not
take seriously,
considered like one of
a major
like
executive
player
in
in
MLS.
MLS.
Right.
Yeah, so
Or like even like at the executive level, he doesn't seem to be like getting the business done, and we still
Right.
get those signings. The fact that we're not getting them now means that we've stepped even further back. It feels
yeah,
like.
it's a little concerning, especially when the foreign signings we're getting are pretty underwhelming.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, I was also going to say something about the apparent redundancy, and we can get into this more when we do the whole squad rundown. But there is it's not. I mean, I guess theoretically, if you think Lewis Morgan is healthy, he's both-footed, so maybe he's the left-sided player now, and that's where you could fit Harper. A combination of Harper, Duncan, and Yengar all at once. I don't know. I'm kind of inclined to think that this kind of support in central midfield may have been a little bit more needed with the departure of Drew Yearwood. I think Drew Yearwood's actually like a kind of good example of like the profile of type of player that you would get for that kind of money.
Right.
I'm not asking for like a big DP spend, whatever that is these days at that position. I guess the one exception I would say is that, we've had actually too many attempts at buying like a $1 to $2 million striker up top. And that's the one area where we probably don't need another like collection of,
1.2 million question marks.
Yeah, exactly. So like, maybe it's at least we didn't spend add another like medium or low price striker to the thing, not, just to add more confusion to that. Before we get into the squad review though, the new kit was officially announced. It is red and black, which means our two kits are going to be this new legacy kit. I guess they got to pick a name every year. You got to run through all the different words.
Not as good as Un Ritmo.
They call me.
That was the best one.
Un Ritmo. It means the Ritmo, or one Ritmo. Sorry. The A Ritmo. But
The legacy kit but you're not allowed to say what legacy it is. You're
I think
not
they
allowed-
redacted legacy.
You're not allowed to mention the specific legacy.
It's funny because I wasn't even thinking about the Metro Stars at all.
Right.
I thought they were just like picking a name out of a hat. I'm not even like
No,
whatever.
yeah.
Like go for it. I don't. As I said, they literally have to do this like every 2 years.
It technically
every
could,
year.
It technically could be a Red Bull legacy since we've had the black kits now going over with. There's the
Yeah.
black kit under Baca and then the black kit that they had the whole year under
Harmus.
Armis and Struber. Yeah.
And all the copy is like create a legacy. So I don't even know if they're going for a DC United thing. Thoughts though? It's on the little zigzags. It is, I believe, asymmetrical, right? It's not symmetrical.
No, I don't know. Maybe I think it's all right. I agree with everyone. I think who's saying like, oh, MLS really tried on their kits this year to make them $200.
Yeah.
Like, I'll buy it if it's 75% off. Maybe like that's kind
In
of
2 years.
Yeah,
when it's
three
cycling
years
out.
and
right at the
Yeah.
bull shop
Yeah.
when it's like hanging on the racks. But
Yeah.
it's shell out for an authentic.
Also seem to be poorly made, it looks like.
Yeah.
as
Yeah,
well.
apparently.
The fanatic syndrome has struck MLS.
I mean, it kind of speaks to what we were talking about last week with everything just seeming to get shittier everywhere, but simultaneously more expensive. This is a very on-the-nose example of that.
Yeah.
Shrinkflation at work.
I think that the kit's fine. I don't know why we shifted to red and black. As we said, it's not like a Metro Stars thing. That's one option to do if you're gonna like go to red and black is like embrace that. They're not really doing that. We had such a good thing going with red and white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And plus, two of our biggest rivals in the conference are red and black.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? Like,
And-
who's deciding to do that?
It was like in the it's in like the South Ward songs, like New York's red and white.
I can't especially if there's other teams in the conference who have that color scheme. I can't even imagine it's like MLS saying like, oh, we need another. We have too many red and black teams. I don't know why you would add us. Like, I don't.
We actually had one of the more iconic like red and white looks. Like like Chicago was were the men in red. I feel like they've sort of diluted that identity, and Toronto have a red thing going, but they're more just like straight red. Like to be reductive about it, Toronto like had more of a Liverpool vibe, and we had more of like an Arsenal look, you know. But
Well, it's like there seems to be no real direction or coherence to like, which colors the team has chosen, the last few years. And it speaks to, well, I mean, I guess I was going to launch from that into it's kind of a Red Bull thing in general, or, at like Leipzig and Salzburg and what have you, to have like, kind of different colors every year, and that they've had, different, they're just always having different colors all the time. Sometimes they have yellow, sometimes they have blue, sometimes they have red, sometimes they have white, so on and so forth. So maybe that lines up with the full kind of Red Bull global way of doing it. But as we've been kind of hammering home more and more recently, the global Red Bull way of doing it kind of sucks.
Well, is that even true?
That's not a good guideline.
Every year, like Leipzig at least always do a white top and red shorts.
Like Leipzig, I feel like that's true. Maybe I'm thinking more of Salzburg, that like Salzburg always has a new color scheme
there was like a
on
green
their kit every
kit
year.
one year.
Like Salzburg's always doing like black and like weird like scales and nets and stuff like that. And like
and their F1 team is very consistent
every
to the point of
year,
being
except their
boring.
second team.
Yeah,
But like that's just because it's its own issue. But yeah, that's
I
like
mean,
it's not
maybe
like
we're
wasn't-
just our own issue.
But it was a very real thing over the course of, the first 10, 15, like 10 or so years of the club being Red Bull, that, it was like white shirt, red shorts. And even if you, kind of wanted to squint your eyes and not see it as being a Red Bull branded, you could still see the New York, just, no context New York MLS team as being white shirt, red shorts.
Yeah.
And that's completely gone.
like
now.
a visual design shorthand for what your team is. And it's like, and it's like you tie your colors to your identity, like your scarves are your colors. And
Like, what do you even think on like Football Manager, how they have a little simplified version of the kit?
Right.
Like, what even is that for us nowadays?
like yellow,
You know?
right? Yellow with red, or what are the short colors for that? I don't even care about the Daniel Patrick. But
They're blue, I think.
Even worse. Well,
And the shorts are black, aren't they? Right?
On the red kit
On the new
now?
kit?
Yeah.
Which,
we don't have red shorts anymore.
No. I mean, the high watermark, it must be said, for the kits and coincidentally the team, it's 2018 still. Like the combination of the red kit and the white kit
Yep.
looked real sharp. So this kit, not
It's
bad.
all right. It's not
all right.
terrible. Yeah.
Not laying into it, but just bring back the red and white. What was wrong with the red and white? Well, getting back into the squad sort of things, there was another announcement, a little bit more squad related, which is the team has named its captains. There's a new captain in town. There's also 2 new vice captains in town. So Emil Forsberg, our new biggest signing ever since Henry, as people are saying.
And Marquez.
Oh,
And
wow.
Cahill.
That's a guy.
And Kleshton. And Kaku.
Yeah, that's a good point. Kaku, I think Kaku is
Kaku's
bigger.
a different thing, but
Question, I think, actually does rival him a little bit.
It's more than you would think.
Yeah.
Won some Belgian league titles.
Yeah. Emil Forsberg is the new captain, and the new vice captains, which I believe this is the first time we've done this, at least in my memory. Who knows? Maybe we did this back in the day. New vice captains are Carlos Cornell, our goalkeeper, and Sean Nealis, defender, our former captain last year. Thoughts on the new captain in town, on the vice captain scheme, on the apparent demotion to the former captain?
I mean, I guess it makes sense. I'm glad that it wasn't like a team vote or anything. That would have been awkward.
Hopefully Nealis isn't. Is Nealis a Carlos Mendez client? I don't know. Or Jorge Mendez? I'm sorry. Are we gonna get a huge drama out of this? No, but
He already gave a quote about it, being like, he talked to Sancho
it's not
or
like I would.
whatever.
That's specifically on why I'm making the joke.
Right. Also, it doesn't
That
seem
Sean
like
Nealis is the
his
last
character
player.
to
He's the
care.
last player you would expect to throw a fit about this. To his credit. That's fine.
even to the point where it's like, oh, he might even be a little relieved.
Yeah, true. No,
I
exactly.
think so.
Yeah.
We have been I guess I'll say it, but skeptics, I guess, about Forsberg to some extent. I think we all agree he's a quality player and that he is probably going to add an edge to the team. We have doubts about how much he will be able to play and how far his contribution will go. But, I do think he is a positive addition to this team. I expect him to make this team better when he's on the field. And I think part of that is being an experienced veteran. I mean, last week I had a little bit more of an acerbic take on him being sort of polite about, indulging everyone or having patience for everyone's, sort of, I don't know, sillier ways about doing things. But I do think that, it feels intuitive for him to be captain. Why not? And I think I'm sort of think it's a canny way of maybe solving a potential problem, which is that my opinion on Sean Nealis remains that I think he should be the best third choice center back in the league. But last year he was instead treated as, the team captain and number
undroppable.
one. Yeah, undroppable. Not that we would have dropped him for Sundom anyway. We wouldn't have. But, this version of the team, I think, was at its best when Sean Nealis was a pretty good third center back in a 3 CB setup with Reyes and Long. And, if the new center back, Isla, comes good, Sean Nealis no longer being captain makes it less awkward to bench him.
Or just rotate the three.
Rotate him, right. Yes, exactly.
But I will say that, as Brit alluded to and mentioned, that they did officially designate vice captains, which will be Nealis and Coronel. First off, you don't even have to name your captain. It's not an official position. Obviously, a guy wears the armband over the course of the game, but a lot of teams over the world and just, kind of traditionally, the captain is just someone you select game to game. You don't come out and say your club as a captain or, whatnot. So it's not really an official position that you even need to announce that formally. You definitely don't need to announce formally who your vice captains are, but the club came out and did so anyway, which, very well could just be a harmless thing of just, adding more content to the mix or whatnot. But if you take it at face value and that it's going to be kind of a somewhat formalized thing to have vice captains, that seems to speak to a expectation that your regular captain is going to be missing a lot of games. And, I guess in a certain way that's reassuring that club leadership is being realistic about the idea of having to rely on Forsberg, to the entire extent of the season is not going to be possible. But it also, speaks to a little bit of the same concerns that we're having, where it's just the entire eggs of this season's basket or have been put in the basket of saying that Forsberg will fix everything and that he single-handedly is going to, turn this team around. That's going to be really hard to do if he's only playing 25, 30 games. That counts.
Yeah.
Or 60 minutes every
match. That might even be a better way of putting it, that if he can't go 90 every week, and he's going to be this kind of singular magic wand on the squad, that's going to be an issue.
What were his minutes like at Leipzig before last year?
He was not a full-time starter.
He was rotational. Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's also going to be funny when Forsberg comes off now, or when he doesn't start. Now the fact that we have 2 explicit vice captains named is whoever gets the armband now, you're I guess you're the first vice captain. It creates a hierarchy where one didn't necessarily exist before. Right.
Well,
I don't think that'll be a big problem.
Also, I think them naming Cornell as one of them means that he's just going to be it makes more sense for the center back to pick up the armband. But even then,
I don't like the concept of goalie captains. Just
exactly.
Right.
But also it's kind of, to go even further into my, kind of concern take on it. I would have thought that Lewis Morgan might have been one of the bigger candidates for that, both because he's an actual field player, and also because he's one of the more experienced and kind of central players to the team, if he's healthy. And if you're not going to name him one of your vice captains, I mean, he was essentially, kind of a captain figure in 2022, especially when Long was a little bit kind of emotionally checked out, as everybody could kind of see. You could tell in like team media and just watching games and stuff like that, that Morgan was a real kind of central leader and a very kind of like vocal and intelligent guy. So him not being in the mix to be one of these vice captains kind of raises my eyebrow a little bit along those lines.
Yeah,
but then it implies that they're not expecting Morgan to be reliable this year.
Yeah, and I feel like, I guess right now Sean Nealis takes the spot, but presumably John Tolkien also.
I was going to say, I have a backhanded optimistic spin on this as well, which is the fact that Tolkien didn't get a vice captainship maybe assures me, because Tolkien is a little like, he's not really captain material on the pitch. I think he's maybe worn the armband a couple times after guys.
It's not like Tyler Adams.
No,
right.
And like Tolkien does get like a little impatient and like is
petulant.
Yeah,
get some kind of cheap cards.
And there's a place for that sometimes, but
right.
like, he's not really captain material, and that's
right.
okay. Most players aren't captain material.
Yeah, exactly.
But it maybe slightly reassures me that Schwartz didn't just walk in and be like, so like, I don't know, who are the guys on this team?
Right.
And I could have seen the club being like, oh, well, Tolkien, I guess he's sort of our go-to like fan favorite, like homegrown guy, and him being like, okay, sure, he's one of the vice captains. So the fact that didn't happen, I don't know, maybe
he is reading the room.
Yeah, maybe he is actually reading the room. We'll see.
My take on the naming the or like making an announcement post about the vice captains is more that they wanted it to be less awkward about Sean Nealis not being captain anymore, I think.
Yeah, that might be it.
Yep.
They just came up with a graphic, but like you're saying, I think this goes within a larger theme in this organization where they kind of over communicate things and shoot themselves in the foot by like resetting expectations. 'Cause
Right.
it reminds me a little bit of like Marc de Grand Prix saying, hey, we're going to spend big this year. And then just like, this is, I guess, technically you're spending.
That is the thing about, and we'll get into this more as well, that is the thing about the Yengar signing too, is that completely tidy signing, which would be less under the microscope if your executive didn't go out of his way to be like, we're going to make signings like you wouldn't believe. It's like, I would believe this signing. I extremely believe this signing.
Totally believable.
Yeah, this has
been the most... I mean, Forsberg is what it is, but like we were just talking about, even with Forsberg, I mean, and some of the other bigger guys who have come in the past, like this has just been a very standard New York Red Bulls offseason.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I tend to kind of agree with the premise that they had at the end of last year, that things were getting kind of shitty and that they needed to kind of make a big gesture to turn that around. And I just don't see that offseason as that big gesture. So...
Yeah, it kind of just seems like they're like, just like say something, and then like, we'll worry about it later. Just like get them, to leave the gates. Like throw some bread out into the crowd.
Yeah, exactly.
Let them eat cake. But yeah. So the vice captain situation, unusual. It does give me a little bit of American football vibes. Defensive captain, offensive captain. Read that into what you will. Maybe that's maybe Schwartz is that kind of German who he's like,
he's into the NFL.
Hi. You are from America? Oh, I am a fan of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Do you want to talk about the squad of the Jacksonville Jaguars? Who is your favorite special teams coach? Not ruling it out.
No, not at all.
So I think to that point, we got some questions. We solicited some questions on Twitter, and I think it's going to lead us into this discussion of the squad. In particular, that question of Forsberg and, just the transfer window here. We had a question from Vincent Escobar asking us, are you concerned with the depth of this team, especially in the summer months? I think the front office is relying too much on players staying healthy. The roster has some significant holes that concern me. I think it's a good question. In addition to Forsberg, that we just mentioned. There's also Lewis Morgan that we mentioned, who has had his own injury problems, as well as Frankie Amaya being out of the team, to be frank, for various reasons, whether that's fitness or injuries. So what do you think?
As well as John
Burke.
Tolkien missing all of preseason, or pretty much all of preseason.
Edelman was out for a stretch too at the end of last season, right?
Trying to remember.
Oh, like right at the end?
Yeah, like at the very end too.
Yeah, you might be right.
But he's been playing preseason.
He's
I
playing
think.
now,
Yeah.
but I think it still speaks to
I think
the
Yearwood had to come in one of the playoff games.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it speaks to the holes in the central midfield for sure.
Yeah.
Yearwood's
And
going to score
I think
Hattie against us.
maybe it behooves us to go through and look at the roster position by position. So,
Top down or bottom up?
I mean, okay, first, let's go bottom up.
Goalkeeper.
Coronel.
Goalkeeper.
Good.
Good player. Probably the best goalkeeper we've had. Glad he's not trying to go to Sturm Graz for some fucking reason again.
See,
That
I
would be funny.
had my tinfoil hat on at the beginning of the preseason, where when he changed his number, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
we're preparing for new number one.
Oh, I don't think we discussed that. He switched to 31?
I guess.
Isn't Luke
That's weird.
Robles' number?
Also, I guess used to be maybe his number.
I think that might have been his number at like Philly back in the day.
Is this like a common goalkeeper
31.
number?
31 is a very common hockey goalkeeper number.
Oh, why is that?
Hockey goalies tend to be in the early 30s or the low 30s.
I guess
as
I
their
wonder
number.
if it's a common goalkeeper number, because if you're not number one, having a number with one in it is nice. 11 obviously is an outfield number, and 21 is also still
a little bit of an outfield number.
So and the 31 is like
10.
Yeah,
You should take 10 as a keeper.
there has to be like a William Gallis version of goalkeeper out there who just like took 10.
Well, there was
inexplicably.
one World Cup where Argentina, their manager decided to just number their squad alphabetically. Then the goalkeeper was Ubaldo Fiol, who ended up being like number 7 or something playing goal. So
That's a Jay Kuda move right there. Man, we got to get Kuda into soccer. Actually, no, he'd probably hate it, and all respect to him.
yeah,
Carlos Coronel, great. This might be AJ Marcucci's year. Who knows?
he's the key to all this.
Hey, Ryan Mara still with the club.
Obviously,
Yeah.
I skipped over him because I'm not disrespecting him. Solid as a rock, as always.
Left back.
Defenders, defensive core. Dare I say, this is the area of the squad where we may have most, at least stayed constant or stable, and
Maybe even improved a
a
little.
little bit better. So we have Noah Isla, who stepped in. He is a U22 player. As listeners may know, we love Hassan and Dom. Some great moments, back in the 2017 U.S. Open Cup. He's funny. He's a big player. It's funny. He's tall.
Big tall guy.
Big tall. But, signing him last year, bit odd, bit of a reach. Where'd we get that idea? Bringing in a player like Isla, even though he's, same agent as Forsberg, a little suspicious, but probably an upgrade. There's the potential. We're discussing the potential of him maybe even displacing Nealis. Who knows?
The preseason reviews have been pretty good, and I guess as far as the preseason reviews have been pretty good to the extent of the highlights I've seen and some of the discourse about him. It seems to be an idea that he is going to be more of a passer, and that this is going to be the first guy who can really kind of play the ball through the middle of the field and on the ground that we've had in a while. I mean, this is kind of a not the most interesting comparison and kind of a cliched one for this club, but a lot of Tim Ream that I saw in some of the Isla clips that I was seeing from preseason. Just those very kind of crisp passes on the ground that break a couple lines and get to the forwards and stuff like that, which we haven't had at this club in a while, obviously.
Yeah.
Nealis is obviously, fairly challenged in that department. Reyes has some moments, but obviously is not exactly Beckenbauer himself. So I think it's an interesting idea to try and get a guy who can distribute a little better from that part of the field, but there's always, and I'll get to that, this further up the field. And I was going back and forth with some people on Twitter about this earlier today. There's such thin margins with this team, with the way it plays and with the way the tactics are, that it's kind of such a zero-sum game when you try and, sort of finesse things a little bit and change from having a guy like Nealis who covers all the physical tools. I mean, Nealis dominant in the air, pretty fast and athletic on the ground, and just is able to be that dominant physical force that you need to clear out long balls and play the high line the way our defense does. When you throw a guy like Isla probably is, who's maybe not as physically robust as Nealis, and takes a little bit more risk with the ball as well in order to do his distribution, I think you're really playing with fire as far as maintaining your defensive solidity, as we've gotten used to with the Nealis and Reyes pairing. So just something to keep an eye on there. In a perfect world, Isla will, be adequate in replacing Nealis's defensive and physical qualities and has the extra dimension of passing to his game. But if he slips off of Nealis's defensive robustness, that could be a major problem. That could be a lot of goals leaked this year that were not being leaked the last couple of years.
It's funny because I think given the same set of information, I had the exact opposite reaction to you in terms of I'm much more bullish, I guess, or excited about the idea of having a more passing centric forward.
Or sounded fairly optimistic. I mean, yeah,
he is,
to some
but
degree.
I think the level of risk actually is maybe more mitigated because we actually finally have an option of going through the middle. I think we were...
It could be.
Yeah, a lot of the stale and stagnant parts of how we recycled the ball being very horizontal instead of vertical.
Nealis always had to dump it to Tolkien, who would just hold it.
Right. And
not progressive.
Or if he tried to make it go right, it would be Duncan who tried to go
and do Duncan's
up the side. If we can pass it into someone like Amaya or Edelman down the middle and they pivot and set up Forsberg to get a transitional goal, I think just having that variety and having a player who has the confidence that, hey, I can actually use my feet to pass the ball to a player, can actually bring a little bit more stability by having options. But I think to that point too, there is no risk and no reward in how you start an attack. I think if you take that risk up front a little bit and depending on how good he is under pressure, that will kind of set us up better to handle issues.
Yeah. Do you think this is a good enough reason as any to try to go 3 in the back this year?
No, we don't have enough.
No?
I don't think we have enough center backs to have the depth for that.
Only if you think you'll be able to not have to use Dylan Nealis at the right back position as much, which maybe Yengar is a part of, calculating for that.
I'll say compared to last year, which is a low bar a bit, we have improved our flexibility at going 3 at the back this year.
Yeah.
It's last year, I don't think it was ever really an option to put in Dom. I think we did it a few times, but it definitely was not a preferred outfit for us to have 3 at the back with Reyes, Nealis, and Dom. This year,
there's Dylan Nealis who can move in there, and then there's some younger center backs. This guy Alexandra, who I guess Brazilian, who was with the RB2 side, who is kind of highly thought of. There's this draft pick who they're rolling the red carpet out for, who we'll see what happens there.
And then there's also Juan Jose Mina, who's still around, and I admit I had thought that both he and Hurtado Cabezas were just half-season loans. Only Cabezas was. And I was just completely flummoxed that we had another player who just showed up for half a season and didn't even play. But no, he's still here for this season. He is allegedly a right back. I don't believe he got any minutes last year. No. But, I guess if we need to break the glass, he could potentially get in there. I mean, it's beginning to get more decent or more distant rather in our history, but the this club has once had success with relatively unknown players or players deep down the depth chart coming good defensively. We've also had our, Lucas Monzon type players who, had interesting looking pedigrees, but we never even got to see if they were bad or not. They just never played. So Mina, a player like that could be like that. But with the Isla is an upgrade, I think, on Ndom, in personnel and upside. As mentioned, Dylan Nealis is still around as a utility player. He did sign a new contract this season. Mm-hmm. That's one thing where if we had let him walk, look, nobody's claiming Dylan Nealis is the key to all this, or that he's like a world beater or anything. But that would have been an alarm bell of like that's a player you kind of need on a squad to play 40 matches a year. So I think it's at least reassuring that they added him. Kyle Duncan, I just Googled it to confirm, but we did actually buy him back permanently to solve that Schrodinger's cat situation. He is here. Kyle Duncan
closed all the tabs. No more reply alls with Ustenda on Kyle Duncan matters.
Yeah. Hopefully he only plays on the right. I guess I saw some things suggesting he was playing on the left again.
Oh, Tolkien was injured.
Yeah, okay. Apparently Tolkien's not really ready to go, so might just have to grin and bear it.
Is Curtis Euphoria a real thing at left back? Is that a real option? They were putting him in like the preseason videos.
I saw him on the concourse last year at one point, so he actually does exist.
Is this the fourth manager where Kyle Duncan would have played left back?
Did he play left back under Lassane?
I think he played under Jesse, right?
Did he?
I think he only played right back in that stretch while Jesse was still here.
Yeah,
because he was the only smart.
Because he got hurt.
Also, Loki wasn't here that long while Jesse was here, because he signed in
2018. Yeah, and then got injured in like the first month of the season.
Yeah. Another thing to say about the squad is that I think it's been ever since COVID. Preseason has been a little weird, and I think the sense of like having discrete games that you can like tune into, especially when you're not in CCL, has made it harder to look at like, oh, what's our first team going to be? I think that's especially true here, where like the starting lineup for our last scrimmage of the year, I mean, it looks like a lot of first team players, but also it's hard for me to say the fact that Isla started over Reyes means anything.
Right.
Reyes played 10 minutes. Morgan played 10 minutes. I think we're really just going to have to wait and see on Sunday to see who comes out. And honestly,
and Schwartz himself and this is kind of concerning, but it is what it is, that he's, especially for a team that said they're going to turn it around this year. He said it's going to take him a while to figure out his starting 11, which,
yeah, take that for what you will. But that defensive core, I think to Vincent's original question about depth, I think we've stayed constant, if not gotten a little bit better defensively in terms of depth.
Except I still feel horrible about our depth just because of the left back position.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there have been many years where we didn't even have a backup left back on the roster. And now, theoretically, Curtis Euphoria is that, right? I don't know. I mean, the other confounding thing is that this club has been just like so hesitant to play the backup left backs that we have. Like, I guess Pendon had a rough stretch,
right. I was thinking of
just even with other randos that we had over the years, like we really just would put the craziest solutions there instead of just playing our backup. Although I do think, put me in that time machine. I think I put Tyler Adams at left back in 2018 in the final play in the Atlanta playoff game to try to claw something back at home as a gambit. But yeah, moving on to and I guess tying that to Yengar in the midfield. This club finds it so easy to sign wide right players. They like do it in abundance, that you got your Andreas Ivans, you got your Mike Grellas. Well, I guess Grella was on the left, but you got your Yengars, you got your Jan Gunnar Solis, you got your Cameron Harpers, just like right.
Marcus Epps,
yeah. But then like left back, they're like, I don't know, how do you do that? What is that? Just a funny little quirk that predates even this current regime. So midfield, when we got depth, departures here are Omir Fernandez on the more attacking side. You also have Luquinhas on the attacking side, and Drew Yearwood, who we're going to be playing this week in Nashville, which is a significant chunk of minutes. I also think a decent quality group of players. However, on the incoming side, we have Emil Forsberg, of course. We have Lewis Morgan, if you count him as a new signing, because he's not hurt anymore. We have Yengar.
Quote unquote, not hurt.
Yeah. We also have Sergeant Goma, who has emerged from his tank, apparently, and has been declared like a new signing as well. And then, continuing down that theme, we also have just Wiki Carmona, who just was gone last year, could theoretically start playing again. And Ronald Donkor, who Ronald Donkor enrolled Mitchell, I guess, although is Mitchell more of a forward? I don't know.
He's definitely more of kind of like an attacking flair player.
Okay.
Maybe at the pro level he moves deeper down the field, but
and now we have Yengar as well adding into this thing. So I think it's maybe best to split this between like base in the midfield and attacking, right? So the base is, I think, composed of Peter Stroud, Daniel Edelman, and maybe Frankie Amaya.
Yeah.
And then pretty much all the other players in the midfield column are either wide or sort of attacking players, which I think the base part, that seems thin to me for how long this season is.
I would also add to your list of players out CCJ because, we just straight up never replaced him at all. So now we're going in with like up
compared to
three,
last summer.
So deep central midfielders in this roster.
Well, and it's especially concerning over the course of 40 games, like Brit just said, and also because in most of the preseason games, from what we've seen, they've played in kind of like the diamond, the old Struber diamond. It seems like Forsberg is kind of like a shuttler in some of these formations, sometimes more at the top tip. But yeah, if you're going to, God knows Struber fucking complained about it. If you're going to play that way with that system, you need a lot of guys. You need a lot of bodies. You need a lot of bodies who are used to playing in the middle of the park and are not really like auxiliary attacking players like Caden Clark, who got benched eventually for not fitting the mold exactly. So,
Right. We also lost Yearwood, who
played
in that kind of like spinal role. Yeah, the attacking players, like instead of Yengar, who I think will be taking minutes away from who I believe is a quality player, Ronald Donkor. We could have gone for another like holding midfielder.
I got Yuba Diarra.
Yeah, we could have gotten
What's happened to Yuba Diarra?
He's in La Liga now. He's on Cadiz. He went back to Salzburg, got loaned out to another Austrian club and did kind of well, and then I think had a run with Salzburg and got a move to La Liga.
Man,
our man, yeah, right before our eyes.
So going forward, as well, who are we're gonna have this problem with the forwards too, but like really, like how what is the vision for creating chances and creating danger here? I think at this point we can't assume Lewis Morgan is going to be fit. I don't know. I'm feeling maybe cautiously optimistic about Forsberg in general, but seems like there's going to be a decent amount of games where he gets taken off at the hour mark or maybe just misses a midweek or something like that. That leaves Frankie Amaya, Cameron Harper, Yengar as other guys. I think these are all players that have some qualities, but I'm not sure that's enough pieces to like make a coherent whole as like a second unit. I'm concerned that everything really does rely on Forsberg not only being fit, but like having a good day,
every single game.
Yeah. So, and I think this is an area where Luquinhas could have really been a nice second option to just pick up a little bit of gravity.
Second option, both for rotation, but also just to be a second banana on the field. Yeah. If obviously soccer's a team game, and I constantly try and hammer that. But if you're both building things up with the idea that Forsberg is going to be, the key to everything about the way you play, and both tactically the opposing teams scouting it. I mean, if it does end up that Forsberg is pretty much our entire attack runs through him, I mean, teams are going to be able to notice that and shut that down. It's, you have to attack as a team. Individual players don't, score goals unless they have the help from the rest of the team, and the rest of the team is coherent. And I'm just, I'm just so skeptical that outside of some, isolated moments of skill, that Forsberg, even on his best day, is going to really be able to transform a team that, even when they were somewhat stable near the end of last year, had a lot of struggles attacking. Now they're going to be auditioning a bunch of new players, including a lot of very young players around Forsberg. We'll see if he has the magic wand to just kind of glue all this together, but that's, like Brit said, assuming that he plays every game, which is near impossible. So just, I mean, it's not a very good roster. I mean, just broad roster, kind of squad core of players that you can fit in different parts of the field, that you can, use in different types of games. It's a pretty bare toolkit beneath Forsberg, especially once you move out Luquinhas and Fernandez.
I would say I'm still bullish about Amaya in general. I think Amaya is a decent player,
right?
But he needs people to combine with. And he also can't have things completely rely on him. Stroud, I think, also should not. I don't know. It's a second season. Like,
it was really hard to tell how well he was doing last year, because, like, and then this has been a general thing with the academy guys and just Red Bull or New York Red Bulls prospects, that in past years, especially during the March years when the academy was starting to take on a more prominent role in producing players for the team was doing really well, so you could tell whether somebody was good or not, based on a very clear litmus test of whether they stuck in the squad. Now it doesn't really mean that much to stick in the New York Red Bulls squad, so it's really hard to tell how much you have there or not, and that's kind of where Stroud is at this point.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel like none of these guys are really like motor guys in the holding midfield.
I will say, just from the eye test, Stroud did not terribly impress me in his minutes last year. I don't think he's bad, but he doesn't seem like the kind of player who's going to be even like a backup on an MLS championship level team.
But even then, I feel like we just don't have. I feel like every good team in the world maybe has one player who's like essential midfielder who has an endless tank of energy, and I just don't see that out of any of our guys, really.
Yeah, that's one thing where if Edelman is going to mature into his role, I feel like he has to develop that a little bit. He has
to get a lot more physically robust.
Yeah. So in the midfield core, we get thumbs down on the depth question. We've had a decrease in depth there that is concerning. Our forward core is Corey Burke, who's still in the club. And is he fit? I don't know. Elias Manuel, Dante Van Zer, Julian Hall, the youngest player ever, and Roald Mitchell. Who's playing the role of Bento Estrella, but in the forward.
We forgot Bento Estrella in the midfield, because apparently, I don't know if you want to say this is Bento Estrella finally arriving, or the midfield depth being as barren as we were just saying, but he apparently got some minutes in preseason. So
you may have
keep your eyes out.
For those keeping score at home on how many signings the club has made since Doyle said we're going to make a bunch of signings. With the signing of Roald Mitchell, we're up to 3 now. Okay, so those are your big major signings.
Eat your heart out now.
Yeah,
haters.
I would say
we made the signings.
Serge Ngoma maybe plays forward too, but I wouldn't know because he's only played like 4 games in his career.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm glad to be pleasantly surprised. I remain here just discouraged a little bit by the lack of protagonism. I think, picking up on a thread we were talking about with Lassane, maybe if we just stick to like a strike partnership, and give a chance to sort of mature into the role and being the guy on this roster, maybe it could work. You know, we kind of liked how Lassane just stuck to Barlow and Manuel being our strike pairing. Neither of them really started pouring in buckets of goals, but you know, I think among these players, whether it's Burke and Manuel or Van Zer and Burke or what have you, like, you know, maybe if they'll surprise us if just proven to be the main guy. I think the team, my reading from afar is that it just feels like everyone is sort of waiting for the next guy to stand up, but it's unclear who that's going to be. It's also so strange now that like Tom Barlow played so much and was like the go-to guy that he was actually just finally traded. Like what made him so prized for all those years, but now instantly dispensable? I don't know. Sort of odd.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, maybe this can be a jumping off point because we didn't really analyze Schwartz and just, you know, kind of the big picture of how the team was going to play last week and how much Schwartz is really just kind of, I mean, hate to say it, I really hate to say it, but sounds a lot like Struber and is a lot of the same sort of profile and a lot of the same rhetoric tactically as Struber. We're going to be, we're going back to the full press yet again. We will be playing a pretty extreme pressing style by anybody's standards. And if that's the case, hope you're prepared for it to look a lot less fierce without Barlow up top. I mean, the entire premise, like Brit was kind of just saying, of Barlow even being in the team and being such a factor over the years. And, you know, Lassane kind of said it explicitly at one point at the end of last year, is that he is there to be the spearhead of the press. He is a big, fast guy who starts the press. He's the first line. He's a tough guy to get around, all that kind of stuff. And then on the other side of the ball, he chases down the long balls that you have to play to stretch the field and, you know, allow the rest of the team to catch up. I mean, whether or not you didn't like his finesse or didn't like that he didn't score very much, there was a very clear function of why he was in the team. And now that he's not in the team anymore, you're going to have to deal with the trade-off of losing the dimensions that he brought. We know for a fact that Van Zer and Manuel are not going to be able to recreate it. Corey Burke is, I mean, he's still around and he has a little bit of a track record in MLS, but he's going to be 33 this year and was, you know, kind of lost last year, as we all saw. So, yeah, just kind of odd to just rip the Band-Aid off with Barlow at this particular juncture. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. It's and it's sort of, I feel like we
have no height in the top of the field now anymore,
and we haven't
either.
For a while. And that was one thing the last couple of years, we were actually weirdly poor in the air. I don't know. I think that'll continue. Van Zer is also not a tall guy. His strength doesn't seem to be in the air at all.
Yeah,
but then
it doesn't seem like he's probably going to win a lot of
just to not to again, I voiced this before, and it's just to revisit, just to prime people for the squad for this year. I still don't understand what it is that Van Zer does,
right?
Except, you know, volley, you know, the occasional cross out of the air. Not particularly big, not particularly strong, not particularly fast, not particularly clean technique. I really don't know what we're supposed to be seeing there, and still don't.
I'm as much of a Van Zer hater as the next guy, but I do think that he's one of the more tactically like forward players in his positioning and like the way that he plays. It's just that he doesn't have the skill to back up necessarily what he needs to do. Like, I can see why he's an attractive player to some who might be scouting, but you know, like, I think like we've seen, if you look at closer things, he relies a lot on being lucky and hitting a volley, or, you know, like not pulling off the technique or skill move that he needed to do to really create what he wanted to do there.
I think the best case scenario, or the ceiling for Van Zer, the vision is an upgraded Daniel Royer type player.
Yeah.
You know, like a second striker. And we know how that went when we just sort of upgrade, or like said, okay, Daniel, you're the main offensive player now, and it didn't really work. He was also getting older, but like it sometimes, you know, there are square pegs and round holes here. It was a bit odd. It was very odd to move on from Klimala to Van Zer, just the profile of player, not to mention, you know, the apparent character of the players involved as well. It's still not clear to me like how Van Zer fits in with either the wide attacking options we have with Morgan or have added with Yengar. I don't know if like he is the best move to have him starting and playing off of Burke. Is it to have him playing off of a little bit more mobile of a player like Manuel? I don't see it. You know, I'm willing to be surprised, but I don't see it.
Honestly, like if I had to pick, you know, a pair out of the players that we have right now, as far as just pure function and being able to create things, I would probably go like Burke and Manuel. Yeah, to be honest.
I mean, maybe
I'm sorry, I just don't rate Van Zer even on top of the character stuff that Brit just alluded to.
I was going to say, I would actually go with Burke and Van Zer. I very much don't rate Manuel, I think.
Manuel's such a confusing player.
Yeah.
You know, maybe at
least Manuel has some, like, a turn of pace, which Van Zer doesn't. Like, Van Zer is really a surprisingly slow striker for this level.
Maybe Forsberg having a little bit more gravity and grabbing the eyes of midfielders and attackers could help Van Zer and you know, bring the center of play a little bit more in the middle of the field. I don't know. We'll see. Point is, it's all a big question mark right here. And I kind of just hope that we at least try some sort of established pairing for a little bit. If we're stuck in like this purgatory area of trying like the different combinations of like 3 or 4 attacking players, I could see this being very frustrating, where it seems like we're not even getting useful information back. Because, you know, also with the kind of players that we have, depending on the phase of play, like Lewis Morgan and maybe even Yengar as well are going to be like some of the more streaky forward attacking players at times. And, you know, it was only 2 years ago that Lewis Morgan led this team in scoring as sort of the main attacking option. So if you count those guys as like main attacking threats as well, we've got like 5 or 6 guys you can combine in different ways. And I could just see us getting all the way till August and being like, I don't know what our best look is.
Yeah.
Which was the chronic issue over pretty much the biggest picture issue of the entire Struber tenure on the field, was that, there was never
a learning.
Yeah, I mean, the team was never consistent enough. The formation was never consistent enough to actually get an idea of who was succeeding or failing.
This brings me to our second question, finally, after all these minutes, from Mark, USA fan. I don't know about that name, Mark.
We all like the USA.
Yeah,
we got no choice.
Yeah. Looks like RBNY will be leaving a DP spot vacant. How common is that in MLS? Seems to me that an ambitious club in the country's biggest market would want to take advantage of it. Well, how common is that in MLS? I don't know. You know, as we've said in different ways, like the sort of sense of what is a big signing these days and this whole capology has sort of eroded in prominence in recent years. This is no longer 2014 where you could rattle off easily off the top of your head what the DPs in the league were. You know, you're like, I know LA has 3 and I know that New York has 2 and all this stuff. In that sense, I sort of resist the continued use of DP as a shorthand for big signing.
Ibrahimovic wasn't a DP.
Right.
Sure.
Busquets is not a DP, like whatever their setup in fucking Miami is.
Yeah. So, you know, I think, but I guess I get what people mean when they say DP. I still think it's a little bit silly to, like, you know, phrase it all about the DPs or whatever. That said, you know, my critique of the forward situation is that, like, I think we need to make more of a decision of who our player is going to be up there. You know, we all rated Klimala, I think, more than Struber did, evidently, and that other people in the fan base did. But I think even if you're negative about Klimala and think he didn't have what it was, I think it was still better for the club to take a swing on a guy, and kind of. And this is true with Fabio to a lesser extent too, and be like, these are our guys we're going to try to go through and not lead to the interminable situation we were just talking about, where we're combining all these different combinations and we don't know what our best look is.
Well, and Lane, like you were saying earlier with, you know, some of the capology and like transfer talk we were doing about, you know, that we have all of these strikers. I mean, Van Zer was a bit of a swing as well. He was direct Klimala replacement, but that did not much worse, but, you know, pretty, you know, substantially worse than Klimala somehow. But we have these Elias Manuels and Fabios and these kind of collections of minor striker signings that never really get committed to. And striker is really the one part, you know, while we're talking about DPs, striker really is the one part of the field where if you want to get a sure thing player, you have to go out and spend a ton of money. That's just how it works. It is the most overpriced position in the game because it's such a hard position to find somebody who works over a, you know, consistent, you know, or over a wide range of different tactics and styles and teams. You have to go out and spend. And I think to kind of answer the question that Mark is asking here about, you know, or to thread it together with Mark's question about whether, you know, the team needs that third DP. If you're constantly saying that, you know, the last piece you need is that striker, is that goal scorer, and that, you know, Klimala wasn't what worked, and that Van Zer, we'll see if his second season ends up turning it around, but if he's not the guy who works, then yeah, you have to kind of, like I said earlier with Dallas, you have to kind of go out and spend like $10-15 million in this day and age on a, you know, proven guy from overseas. You can't just keep, you know, kind of doing these little bets on 1 to 2 million, you know, loans from Brazil or whatnot. These, you know, guys who are just, you know, not really proven. You have to go out and get a known entity. And if this team is ever, if they actually are, you know, being honest that everybody, for, you know, everybody, all the critics think that the only thing that's wrong with this team is they don't have a goal scorer, then yeah, go out and spend that money and get that proven goal scorer, because we haven't really done that yet. I mean, even if you think of Van Zer as like going out and getting a proven goal scorer from the Belgian league, which, you know, is major variability on, you know, the level of actual competition there, not the level of competition, not the level of, you know, quality of transfer it produces. When you're actually talking about the games itself, it's maybe not that hard to score in the Belgian league. And he wasn't even the top scorer on his team. You know, the other striker he was paired with at Genk ended up, you know, being an even bigger signing, or at Union, ended up being an even bigger signing for a European team. So, I think to kind of thread together the idea that we need that one big DP and the idea that we need that one big goal scorer, that seems like a pretty direct thing to solve. And maybe to the club's credit, we'll have to wait and see. Apparently, the latest word from transfer analyst Matt Doyle is that the club is maybe waiting till the summer to make a big striker signing. So we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I think there's for that question, it just reminded me that we were once linked to Ivan Toney. So, you know, well, perfect kind of example there. I mean, that was one area. I mean, maybe this is the brave new age we're in now, where Schneider is going to have, the Bursar on speed dial in Austria and be able to get whatever money he needs. But that was a perfect example of where, when Thelwell was in charge, he identifies a player who we all know ends up being the real deal for another club. But Red Bull just didn't want to budget for the extra, whatever 2 or 3 million it would have cost to buy him from Peterborough, as Barry Fry literally quoted. Yeah, and to that point, it was also, I think, part of that's like, oh, if we're gonna do kind of a savvy move like that as well,
need a good track record from the sporting department. Is, you know, if we do spend like $15 million on a striker, I don't necessarily know.
Trust this sporting department.
Well,
to
yeah,
do
like
it.
who would they sign? Like, well, we talked earlier about how much we paid for Yenger, and I don't think he's like a $2 million kind of guy.
Profile,
maybe,
yeah.
I also think this is, you know, pop science. This is just vibes, I admit, but I think it is more likely for a player like Sergin Goma, or I don't know, Julian Hall, I guess, the new wonder kid. I think it creates a better environment for them to like surprise you and really like emerge out of, you know, the ranks if you have an established player already there to like absorb some of the attention and heat, and then like have some more reliable production, and then that other player comes in and starts contributing as a young player. Instead of like, you know, I don't think it's serious to like be going into the season being like, oh, but we have Julian Hall and Sergin Goma, and I'm like, do they even have the stature to get minutes now? Because like initially they're going to be getting like spot starts in like 30 minutes here and there, like that's not a clear pathway into like legitimately contributing, you know, to the team. So if you know, you have an established player of leading the line, maybe you can see bits and pieces. And I guess to your point that you were saying earlier, Cork, about you know, when the team was playing well, you could tell who was actually good because they were staying in the squad. That I think that is true with in a more narrow way with this as well. Now it's when the team is also mediocre and off kilter, it's hard to evaluate a player like Ngoma or Hall, where it's like, oh, do they just have a tidy touch here or there? Are they actually progressing and fitting into the system? If there is no system or no coherence, it's harder to actually make calls like that. So the forward position, still a problem, I think, depth-wise, and needing maybe a little bit of investment, whether that's a DP or otherwise. But I guess I'll just harken back as well to my criticism from earlier, which is that I'm also concerned that, you know, we could have used a Luquinhas type player just for a little bit of redundancy to help here as well. I think that's one area where the sporting side failed to reinforce the club. Because back to the original whole thing about this, that Mark de Grand Prix and Jochen Schneider came out and said, oh, this is going to be a crazy big offseason. We're going to make all these changes. You know, being generous, if you're like, okay, Forsberg is a new move, sure, great. This just like the pure numbers of in and out is very underwhelming. Like this is a sort of standard offseason for us, but I actually think maybe even tilts towards the negative in terms of just the inflow and outflow of players. Yengar, I think, maybe has helped the net number a little bit more, but especially in terms of just those core midfield players between Luquinhas, Edelman, Luquinhas, Yearwood, and Fernandez, and then CCJ back to last year. That's four players in that part of the field where we have not really replaced those positions at all. All the midfielders we brought in have been wider players, but you know, with Yengar, that's really only the main midfielder we brought in. Okay, final question we're gonna pull out is squad player most likely to have a burner. By burner, of course, we mean
Kyle
secret.
Duncan. I think he mostly uses his burner to look at other Hondas on Instagram.
Hondas?
Yeah.
I think the person who has a burner on this team is Sandro Schwarz, and it's his profile photo is an official, you know, team photograph of Joe Burrow throwing a football. And his bio says, you know, Bengals fan #1. And he's retweeting, you know, fantasy football guides.
Fantasia.
Yeah. And that's why he moved here, just to be a
fantasy football commissioner.
I changed my mind about being a Jaguars fan. That's too London
English coded. Yeah.
Next week I'll pick a different team, but you know, for some reason I've landed on Joe Burrow.
I was gonna say Cincinnati feels very Teutonic.
That's true.
Well,
yeah, that does fit. Yeah. So I think, you know, Sandro Schwartz definitely has a burner account and
It's all football.
yeah, American football.
Yeah, gridiron.
He is very. He heard us being like, I think Struber would love American football, and he was like, "Oh, really?" And he looked into it, and he's gotten really into it.
Sam, do you have a
Von Zier? I think actually absolutely has
really?
a burner.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I mean, he's the one.
100%.
He's the one who's literally like gotten dumped and like clowned on by his Love Island girlfriend.
Yeah.
for posting too hard.
He probably has been sliding some DMs.
Oh God, yeah. Well, I guess I don't know for a fact, but towards the end of my time doing Once a Metro, there was a strange account that was kind of hovering around some of my threads and posts and like kind of pushing back on some of my criticism of our old friend Gerhard Struber. And it was a blank account that was like fairly young, only started in like 2022. And it was under a name that a colleague of mine at Once a Metro kind of dug through the New Jersey phone records and did not find this as a name that existed anywhere. But a fella named James Strubinio, who was kind of hovering around my account, only seemed to be following like Austria and Red Bull stuff. Yeah, who knows? Who knows what was going on there?
And you think that's Corey Burke?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's what I'm implying.
He couldn't even throw a follow to like Mina Kimes and like Stephen A. Smith to throw you off the trail a little bit. I was sitting here, I couldn't remember the name, and I was like, man, what kind of name has no occurrences in New Jersey? Not a single person. James Strubinio. Might have just
Brit. It's like if you were trying to pose as like an Italian. Oh, my name's Brit Berdinio.
Yeah.
I'm Peaches Changarelli.
That's my full name actually.
That might be a guy. Yeah. Just putting a mustache on and saying hello. How do you do?
When you're born in New Jersey, they give you your American name and your Italian name. That's how it happens.
Yeah.
And then they let you play quarterback for the Giants.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, that only happens once a century or so.
So I think it's time now to give like just a general prognostication about this season. Unfortunately, this year we don't have any like fun prop bets to joke about this year because things have gotten serious and we must continue the holy war on gambling. Like it's gotten too far. It's no longer a laughing matter. Like let's
We're only half joking.
Yeah,
honestly.
So none of that. Also, it just, I don't think we need to belabor the point, but just this current situation of the squad, I think just lends itself less fun to that. We've already talked about the squad for however long this episode is, but this season, what is the vibe for this season? How well do you think this team is going to go? I have a bit of a hot take, but I want to turn the floor over first.
You brought up the sports betting thing, and I've been watching, as the Knicks have been good this season and seem to be built well. The refs have really been screwing the pooch on a lot of Knicks games, and, I do think there might be some kind of gambling stuff involved. And I wonder if the league will be more vulnerable to this with the referee lockout.
Yeah, we didn't mention that, right? We forgot to mention that. There is a lockout right now. PRO has locked out the referees for the indefinite future, so there will be replacement refs. It'll be interesting to see how much worse they are. Listeners may know that we're a bit of ref apologists on this show. But
me a long time one, too.
Gloves are coming off now. These scabs.
I mean, we roasted Ernie Constantine a couple years ago. That was one of the more specific examples I've seen of the reffing in the Open Cup being substantially worse.
Yeah, was that not last year? Or I'm just like I'm feeling like
that was 2022. That was the Hartford Athletic Cup game in 2022.
That's okay. The last 4 years are all one.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, a couple years ago. Ernie Constantine was a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. Anyway, they're scab refs. I wonder where they're sourcing them from. What if it's just a guy from our rec league just walking around?
Fist bumping everyone.
She's like, hey, you need to pass that.
Vanzier just like totally whiffs on a volley and he goes, peaches!
Yeah, Vanzier attempts a bike and he's like, oh, that's a tricycle.
Yeah, so if the reffing seems worse this weekend, it is worse. I wonder, how does that work with, are they going to have scab VAR too?
I guess.
Apparently Mark Geiger is going to run it. Mark Geiger is on the management side. Yeah.
Man.
Mark Geiger is up in the ivory tower now.
Are they going to bring down, who did they bring in to...
Howard Webb?
Howard Webb. Are they going to bring in Howard Webb?
Oh, God. I don't even know if he's still with the operation. I think he might have just left. But
Geiger's just going to plug the Matrix directly into his brain to VAR every match at once.
Yeah.
It's the first time someone's going to use the Apple Vision Pro for good use.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. But yes, thank you for reminding me. MLS will be having replacement refs for the intermediate future, it seems, unfortunately.
But MLS games are already fixed. I wonder how much worse it's going to be.
Are they? If they're fixed, they should fix them better because it's not very. I mean, I guess
Not
it's
very
just
compelling,
for,
yeah.
I guess it's not being fixed for. I guess just for gambling, not for narrative sake. Yeah.
Well, I guess for the first, I mean, like we're kind of saying, everything is so jumbled and everything is so kind of difficult to discern at this point that I don't even know if I want to go out on a limb and give a prognosis for the whole season. I do think Nashville is a very interesting opening week opponent, especially along the lines of what Brit was just touching on a minute ago about how there's been so much outgoing moves from this team over the last this offseason, over the last few years. And as you know, a lot of people know by now, Nashville is kind of a center of all that. You've got Drew Yearwood is just the latest player now, who is an ex-Red Bulls player who was moved over to Nashville, whether voluntarily or not. But Sean Davis, obviously, Alex Muil still involved with the team. And it's just kind of an instructive show with some of those guys. Dax McCarty's not with them anymore, but with those guys I just listed, kind of an instructive show of exactly how Red Bull style players can look in a more conventional team. So it'll be interesting to see, and we touched on this when his transfer was made, that it'll be interesting to see how Drew Yearwood slots into that team. But it'll also be interesting in that they are really kind of the anti-Red Bull in MLS, and as far as they are the most conventional kind of old traditional British football 4-4-2 kind of side that keeps somewhat of a low block defensively, doesn't really take tons of risks with numbers. Going forward, apparently it's been a major discourse in the Nashville fan base the last couple of years that they, don't try to score as much. So in that way, it's kind of a really good litmus test for how strong a Red Bull team is and how potent a Red Bull team's press is, if they can crack the nut of a team like Nashville and not get burned on the other end by the somewhat more traditional counterattacking that Nashville plays. It'll be an away game. It'll be the first time we've done an away game in Nashville, I feel like, where there hasn't been like a lot at stake, like ever. Yeah. But I just think there's a lot that I just laid out there that make it kind of like an interesting first test game. So that makes it somewhat intriguing for me.
Yeah, I think even with everything I've said about it being so hard to wrap your mind around the league and who's supposed to be good, Nashville does present a prompt where if we go in and win, like it will, I think, raise my eyebrow at least. It'll feel a little bit like a statement. In 2018 and even in like 2020, I mean, obviously Nashville wasn't around in 18, but I think I would have still maintained an expectation that we go in and winning in that kind of fixture would be normal, like, you know, and drawing, I guess, acceptable. Over the last couple of years, as we've bemoaned, that standard is sort of degraded. Now, if we go in and we rattle off a win in Nashville, you know, that will be notable, especially if it's not like a grindy 1-0 win like the last one we got down there. So we'll see. I have a weird hunch, you know, maybe it's just going to go totally tits up and this is going to be false. But I have a weird, like, sense that this team could start the season weirdly well. I just get the sense that everyone is sleepwalking a little bit and that maybe Forsberg has like a little bit of spark the way that new like European DP signings, for lack of a better word, do sometimes before they kind of get stuck in the motions and kind of revert to the mean a bit. And I think there's a chance this team like gets a little bit of good results, like especially earlier in the season. But then my concern about the team is that the depth and then getting a little bit stale over the season is not going to be sustainable.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be enough to beat a solid conventional Nashville side on Sunday. It will be, I think when I'm watching, it will be interesting to see how boring the game is, to be frank. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the biggest crimes of Struber is how boring his football was. Mm-hmm. It was not fun to watch. That was true for Armas as well in a different way. So, you know, even if we don't win on Sunday and if it's just a more engaging game, we're going back and forth and Forsberg seems to make a difference in that way, that could seize my attention. But I have a weird nugget of optimism that maybe will, you know, champ at the bit a little bit to begin this season. But I can't, without more investment or more reinforcements in the summer, I cannot see us really getting over the hump and mounting like a significant charge to be like a serious team this year, to be frank.
Well, I'm kind of with you where I think even last year, if we didn't have the abysmal start we had last year, right, I feel like the team would be just held in a different conversation. The momentum might have carried it a bit differently. Honestly, like, all things considered, maybe we are still kind of strong within the league, it seems. But, you know, I feel like my expectations for what a good team might be isn't necessarily like, oh, we're going to like scrape by 4th or 5th in the Eastern Conference and like kind of get through that season and really, you know, do whatever a playoff push is or whatever that kind of thing is. Obviously, I'd much rather see kind of the sustained success that comes with having a deep squad and like better fitness and good tactics of competing for like a shield. Like, I think that's always where at least my standard of am I going to enjoy this season will be, because it's like you're saying, the game's only as fun to watch as it can be. But if you are winning a lot, you know, on a consistent basis to the point where like there's this tension on your season to win out more to win this trophy, it kind of keeps you in it a little bit better. And, you know, like last year we were talking, there was just no stakes for like 3 months of the season. And it's just like, oh, we don't know what's going to go on. There's so many games in hand that we have that we just do not know where we stand, because it's all in the future or unknown. So, you know, like, the barrier to becoming an entertaining team has also gone up in this league because there's so much more for like trash to sort through. Like, being a middling team is so boring.
Yeah, and that in that respect, also one thing that's been slightly conspicuous by Schwartz is his refusal to really say any standards. I mean, people have asked him like, "Oh, what are you gonna? Where do you see the expectation for this team?" And he said, you know, I don't want to like say a number, basically, which is a fairly normal answer. And I think, you know, it's the responsible answer. Like, it is sort of goofy whenever a manager is like, we're going to get the ball and we're going to score. You know, you don't want to do that. But then like his comments were even blander than that, of like not even being like, oh, I want us to be a top team and like be competing. It was kind of just like, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Which it would have been a little bit more, it would have made my blood run a little bit more warm if he said something more about the lines of like, we're going to go and eventually we're going to have the expectation to win every game. But, he is a guy who just most recently was managing a relegated team. Schwartz to me right now is a complete blank canvas for better or for worse. Like, I still am sort of relieved that Struber is just gone. And compared to every manager we've had since Jesse, like, he just feels like the most NPC of, I'm not really counting Carnell in this respect, but, I guess Lassane too. I don't know. But, he's really not made any impression on me so far at all. And I think hopefully that's for the better. But the fact that he's not even saying we're gunning to return to the top is leaves me a little uninspired.
Yeah.
The blank canvas is a little worrying to me. I don't know. I feel like there are just a lot of especially, we watched the press conference before our last episode and just like the way in which he held himself, he and Schneider, the arrogance and the way that questions were answered,
casualness,
it just left a really weird kind of taste in my mouth, and it just felt very similar to the way in which even just Struber presented himself.
Well, yeah, this is this goes back to since Schwartz got hired and my general sense of it, but it's been intensified by some of these comments we've heard from him, both in the actual content and rhetoric of the comments and in his, literal voice and accent, unfortunately. I just don't see how, especially some of these players who have been with the club for a long time and are, sort of going through the motions the last few years as things have declined. I just don't see how you sit them down with a guy like Schwartz preaching the same tactics and principles that Struber was in the same accent, and expecting any kind of different energy to this team than you got from Struber over the last few years. Maybe Forsberg's a big wild card in that. We'll see. But both to the extent that Schwartz appears to be kind of an NPC, like we're kind of saying, and just sort of uninspiring and blank. But I also think to the extent that he is kind of a continuation of our extremely failed last permanent manager, is a bit of a concern. I really have a tough time seeing how this changes the equation at all from what it's been the last 3-4 years.
Which means I think, fans and maybe even players will be quicker to turn on him when the results go south, or when we have issues with our depth, or when Forsberg doesn't really follow through, or we have continued problems at the striker position.
Yeah. And they've compared to Struber, I hope this comes true. Compared to Struber, it seems like he might not even take it personally if people get frustrated with him. I almost get a vibe of him being like, oh yeah, okay, we've started losing. All right, I have to go now. Well, all right, thanks everyone. Okay, it was a good tour. I was hoping to stay for 3 years. It was only 1. That's kind of a drag, but anyway, see ya. I hope this isn't true, because I hope, the team just does well. He does so far radiate a different energy than Struber, where he doesn't seem like he's just waiting to aggressively move to the next job. If anything, it's the opposite a little bit, where he's like, oh, cool, I got offered a safe job in a smaller corner of the world where I can just
get lost
chill
in New
a little
Jersey
bit.
for a little bit.
Yeah. You guys are going to run into him when you go to your weekly trip to American Dream. He's just gonna be
I hope so.
Oh yeah, there was a 2-for-1 coupon where I could get a free Vikings jersey with my Mr. Beast burger.
I will say to that point where I think with the unseriousness with which Schwartz was taking the press conference, also to me at least seemed like he might at least be a little bit more personable of a guy, and less outwardly and cynically an asshole that Struber was.
Not a psychotic narcissist,
right?
Hopefully.
And he's at least paying the lip service, I'm going to bring my family here. I'm gonna be
stuck
a
out
nice
to me
guy.
too. That I do feel like that was one thing where the delivery maybe got a little garbled, but like it did feel like he was making a point of mentioning that his family moved here and that he's not in any hurry to leave.
Well, he also said something like, I'm not just here to, just coach the games and then go home immediately, which, we saw Struber posting on Instagram from the airplane tarmac every fucking 3-day weekend.
Yeah. So, I think that's noticeable, but I do think some of his laughing, I don't know. Yeah, some of his laughing, if I'm feeling generous, like maybe he was just like trying to make jokes that like didn't land. I do think Schneider came off a little bit more malevolent in that press conference, especially with the thing with like nitpicking about the 3 managers in a year or whatever. Like that was all Schneider. But like when Schwartz was laughing, being like, "Oh, what coaches we have," I think that was just sort of an awkward
attempt at a joke.
Yeah, and I just feel like when COVID happened, like everyone just like put on their sweatpants and stopped caring a little bit, and we're still just in sweatpants.
Are not actually like in presentation mode anymore.
Right.
Like,
and maybe I guess they did have their media day today and they were in person and hopefully that was better, but like part of me wonders if just like always being on Zoom facilitates that a little bit. But I don't know.
You can't be blaming COVID. They started putting stretchy stuff in jeans in 2018 or so.
Saying it's Uniqlo's fault?
It was before Uniqlo. Uniqlo wasn't the first to make stretchy jeans. So
Uniqlo's the only clothing brand I know of. So that's as far as I know. Yeah, weird season, weird vibes. Sandra Schwartz, what a guy!
Show us what you got.
It's pronounced Schwartz.
I'm not going to do that. Anything else for this week? I was already being generous with the soft Z, the schwa,
Schwartz.
I could just aggressively start including a T that's not there. Schwartz. Any other thoughts about Nashville, or should we end it there?
I think Drew Yearwood's going to score a hattie on us.
I think he's going to do well.
Yeah.
I think maybe he'll score a goal and then get an incredible red card.
I hope he celebrates.
Yeah. Actually, though, because like, he didn't spend enough time here to like.
We didn't do right by him.
Yeah, to warrant a muted celebration. And that reminds, we're not going to talk about it this week, but we should eventually talk about Lisanne being in DC. When
he should celebrate.
Well, we'll find out then.
Alex!